The deeper Anna ventures into the forest, the more it reveals about Mark, a memory, a truth, and a choice she can't ignore. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Before diving into this extraordinary tale, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more intriguing stories like this. Let us now tread through the forest to discover the truth behind Mark's mysterious disappearance. Anna adjusted the strap of her mailbag as she trudged along the familiar dirt path cutting through the dense forest that surrounded the small town of Clearbrook. Her route was a quiet one, dotted with isolated houses and lonely mailboxes, each nestled amidst towering trees and wild undergrowth. She preferred it this way. The silence of the woods gave her space to think, even if those thoughts often circled back to Mark. It had been 3 years since her husband disappeared into these very woods, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a hole in Anna's life she hadn't managed to fill. The official search had ended long ago, the townsfolk's murmured sympathies fading into silence. Yet, every day as she walked her route, Anna found herself scanning the trees for any sign of him, a movement, a sound, anything to suggest he was still out there. One overcast morning, as Anna approached a bend in the path near Cedar Hollow, a faint sound stopped her in her tracks. She cocked her head, straining to hear. It was a voice. No, not just any voice. Mark's voice. "Anna, over here," it said, soft and distant. Her heart raced. She spun around, eyes darting between the shadows cast by the trees. "Mark," she called, her voice trembling, but the woods remained still, save for the rustle of leaves in the wind. She stood there for a long moment, frozen in the grip of disbelief and hope, before shaking her head. "I'm losing it," she muttered to herself, forcing her feet to carry her forward. Yet the sound lingered in her mind, so vivid and unmistakable. The next day it happened again. This time she was passing a cluster of wild blackberries when she heard it. Mark's laughter, clear and familiar. She stopped, nearly dropping the stack of letters in her hands. The laughter seemed to come from just beyond the trees. Her pulse quickened as she stepped off the path and pushed through the undergrowth. The forest seemed thicker here, the air heavy with a strange, almost electric energy. She came to a stop near a towering tree, her breath catching in her throat. At her feet lay a single envelope, damp with dew and smudged with dirt. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The envelope was addressed to Mark. The handwriting looked like hers, but distorted somehow, as if written hurriedly or under duress. She tore it open, revealing a letter that made her heart pound. The words inside were familiar, but not entirely. It was a letter she had written to Mark years ago, apologizing for an argument. But some of the sentences were wrong, different. The letter mentioned things she'd never said, things she couldn't have known at the time. It was as if someone or something had rewritten it. Over the next week, Anna began finding more letters scattered along her route. Some were unopened, others partially decayed, but all bore a connection to Mark. The strange thing was that many of them seemed to reflect moments she had shared with him, yet twisted in ways she couldn't explain. And always, accompanying these discoveries, she heard his voice, soft, distant, and filled with an almost pleading tone. Desperate for answers, Anna confided in Samuel, the forest ranger. Samuel had always been kind but aloof, a man who seemed more at home among the trees than with people. But the letters changed his demeanor. "The forest remembers," he said cryptically, his eyes narrowing. "It's been known to play tricks on those who carry unresolved grief. But sometimes it's trying to show you something." Samuel adjusted his wide-brimmed ranger hat and beckoned Anna to follow. As they moved deeper into the woods, the air became cooler, with the sunlight barely penetrating the dense canopy above. Anna's mailbag bounced against her hip. But it was empty now. She had abandoned her route for the day, unable to think about anything but the letters and voices. Samuel walked with a quiet purpose, his boots crunching against the undergrowth. Though he said little, Anna could sense the weight of his thoughts. She had always thought of him as a solitary figure, someone who kept his distance from the rest of the town. Now, it seemed he was the only one who might understand. "What did you mean when you said the forest remembers?" she asked, breaking the silence. Samuel stopped and turned to her, his weathered face thoughtful. "This place is old, Anna. Older than the town, older than the stories people tell about it. Over the years, people have said the forest holds on to things, memories, moments, even people. Some call it superstition, but I've seen enough to know there's something to it." Anna shivered, hugging her arms. "You think it's remembering Mark?" "Maybe. Or maybe it's remembering something connected to him." Samuel's eyes scanned the trees, as if searching for unseen watchers. "Whatever's happening, it's not random. The forest wants you to see something." The idea unsettled her, but she nodded. If there was even a chance that the forest could reveal what had happened to Mark, she had to follow it. They walked for what felt like hours, the forest growing eerily quiet as they went. Even the usual sounds of birds and insects seemed to fade, replaced by an oppressive stillness. Finally, Samuel stopped at a clearing surrounded by ancient, gnarled trees. In the center was a pile of weathered objects: a rusted lantern, a crumpled jacket, and a tattered mail bag, its leather cracked with age. Anna stepped closer, her breath catching as she recognized the bag. It was identical to the one Mark had carried on his last delivery run before he vanished. Her fingers brushed the worn leather, a flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "It wasn't like this when I found it," Samuel said. "It was buried under a layer of leaves and dirt, like it had been here for decades. But the letters inside, they weren't. They looked as fresh as if they'd been written yesterday." "Have you read them?" she asked. Samuel shook his head. "No, they're yours to read. I figured they'd mean more to you." She knelt beside the bag and carefully opened it. Suddenly, a brief gust of wind sent dozens of letters spiraling out from the bag onto the ground. Anna glanced over them. They were all addressed to Mark. The handwriting varied, some neat and precise, others scrawled and hasty. Anna took one at random and began to read. The words sent a chill down her spine. "Mark, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please, if you're reading this, know that I never wanted you to get hurt." The signature was smudged, the ink running as if it had been left out in the rain. But the content was clear. Whoever had written it knew something about Mark's fate. "There's more," Samuel said, his voice low. "Look around. The forest, it's different here." Anna stood, clutching the letter. Now that he mentioned it, she noticed the air felt heavier, the trees looming in ways that defied logic. Shadows danced where there was no wind, and faint whispers seemed to curl around her ears, just on the edge of understanding. "What is this place?" she asked. "I simply call it the clearing," Samuel replied. "But it's more than that. This is where the forest remembers most strongly. It's like a crossroads, where past and present blur. If you're going to find answers, it'll be here." Anna sat cross-legged in the clearing, surrounded by letters that felt as fragile as the memories they contained. Each one seemed to carry a weight beyond the ink and paper, a whisper from the past that begged to be heard. Samuel stood nearby, his watchful gaze scanning the forest, as if anticipating an unseen presence. The air felt thick, as though the forest itself was leaning closer to listen. The next letter she opened was written in a rushed scrawl, the words jagged and uneven. "Mark, I'm sorry for what happened that day. I should have been the one to say something, to stop it before it went too far. You didn't deserve this. I hope you find what you're looking for." It was unsigned, the handwriting unfamiliar. Anna's hands trembled as she set it aside and reached for another. This one was more neatly written, almost formal. "Dear Mark, you were right about the forest. It's not just a place, it's something more. I don't know if it's alive, but it's aware. I think it's been watching us, all of us. Please be careful. Don't go too far. Some things are better left alone. Anna looked up at Samuel. These letters, they're from people who knew him. They knew what he was doing here. Samuel nodded solemnly. It seems like Mark wasn't just delivering mail. He was unraveling something tied to this forest. Anna's breath caught. The idea of Mark's quiet pain, his subtle moments of withdrawal, suddenly seemed sharper in her mind. He had been carrying more than she'd realized. She picked up another letter, this one addressed directly to her husband in her own handwriting. Her heart lurched. Mark, you've been distant lately, and I can't help but feel like you're slipping away. Whatever it is you're not telling me, I just want you to know that I'm here for you. Always. She had written those words years ago, but the paper looked fresh, as though the forest had preserved it. Tears welled in her eyes. He was keeping so much from me, she whispered. But why? Samuel crouched beside her, his voice low and steady. Guilt can make people hold back, even from the ones they love. Maybe he thought he was protecting you. Or maybe he didn't know how to share the weight of what he was carrying. Anna's fingers brushed the edges of another letter, and she unfolded it carefully. This one made her blood run cold. Mark, I can't do this anymore. The forest is pulling at me, whispering things I don't want to hear. If you go deeper, you'll understand, but I'm warning you now. It'll show you things you might not want to see. Be careful, my friend. The signature was faded, but Anna recognized the name. Ethan. Mark had mentioned Ethan once, a childhood friend who had died in a tragic accident during a camping trip. The name felt like a ghost, rising from a past Mark had never fully explained. Ethan, she said aloud. Mark told me about him. He died in these woods. Samuel's expression darkened. The forest remembers more than just Mark, it seems. If Ethan's tied to this place, maybe that's why Mark came back. The revelation hit her like a wave. Mark had been searching for something in the forest, not just answers, but perhaps absolution. The accident that had taken Ethan's life had left scars that Mark had hidden, even from her. The letters, the echoes, they were fragments of that buried pain, now surfacing through the forest's strange, otherworldly power. He came here to face it, Anna said, her voice trembling, to face what happened with Ethan. But what did he find? Only one way to know, Samuel replied, his voice heavy. We keep going, but be ready, Anna. The deeper we go, the more the forest will show us. And it won't hold back. Anna looked around at the clearing, at the way the shadows seemed to ripple and shift, as if the forest were alive and watching. She steeled herself, gripping one of Mark's letters tightly in her hand. Whatever lay ahead, she had to keep going. For Mark, for Ethan, and for the answers that waited in the forest's depths. The forest grew darker as Anna and Samuel pressed forward, its canopy thickening into a near impenetrable shield against the fading daylight. The ground beneath them turned soft, mossy, and uneven, as though the woods themselves were reshaping to guide or challenge their path. The letters from the clearing now rested in Anna's bag, their weight a constant reminder of the truths she had uncovered, and the ones still waiting. This place, it feels different, Anna murmured. The air seemed heavier, charged with a strange, almost electrical energy that prickled against her skin. Samuel glanced at her, his face lined with unease. It is different. The deeper you go, the stronger the forest's memory becomes. It'll start showing you things. Not just fragments of Mark's past, but your own, too. The warning settled in Anna's chest like a stone, but she nodded. She couldn't turn back now, not when the answers felt so close. The first manifestation came suddenly. As they rounded a bend in the path, Anna froze. Ahead of her, shimmering like a mirage, was a scene from her own life. The small kitchen she and Mark had shared, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Mark sat at the table, his head bent over a letter, his expression distant and conflicted. The vision was so vivid that Anna instinctively reached out, but her hand passed through the image, dispersing it like smoke. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. A memory, Samuel said grimly. Yours or his, it's hard to tell. The forest doesn't just show you what you're looking for. It shows you what it wants you to see. They continued on, but the visions became more frequent. Anna saw fleeting glimpses of Mark as a child, running through the woods with a boy she recognized as Ethan. She saw herself, younger and carefree, laughing with Mark under a canopy of stars. And then darker images, Ethan's terrified face, a hand reaching out to stop him as he slipped and fell into darkness. Each vision hit her like a physical blow, dredging up emotions she hadn't prepared to face. Guilt, grief, love, and anger swirled inside her, each memory peeling back another layer of the life she had shared with Mark, and the pain he had carried alone. He blamed himself for Ethan, Anna said softly as they paused to rest by a twisted tree. All this time, he carried that guilt, and I never knew. Samuel's voice was gentle. Guilt like that, it's not something people let go of easily. He probably thought he was protecting you by keeping it to himself. Anna looked up at the darkened forest, her resolve hardening. But it consumed him. It brought him back here, to this place. If I had known, maybe I could have helped him. Or maybe he needed to face it alone, Samuel replied. Sometimes the only way to find peace is to confront the things we fear most. As they ventured deeper, the forest's power grew stronger. Shadows moved with a will of their own, whispering words Anna couldn't quite understand. The air shimmered with a strange light, casting everything in hues of green and gold. It felt as though the forest were alive, watching them, testing them. Then they reached the river. The water was impossibly still, its surface like a mirror reflecting the tangled branches above. On the far bank stood another vision. Mark, older and gaunt, his eyes hollow but filled with determination. He was holding something, a journal. The vision lingered longer than the others, giving Anna time to take in every detail. She stepped forward, but Samuel caught her arm. "Wait," he said sharply. "That's not just a memory. That's a fragment of him, left behind." "What do you mean?" Anna asked, her voice breaking. "Sometimes when people come here, they leave pieces of themselves," Samuel explained. "Echoes. They're part memory, part spirit. If you interact with it, the forest might take more than you're willing to give." Anna pulled away from his grasp, her eyes locked on the vision. "I have to. If this is part of him, I need to know." She stepped closer, the forest holding its breath as she approached the river. The vision of Mark turned to look at her, his lips moving as though speaking. She strained to hear, the words just beyond reach. And then, as her foot touched the water's edge, the vision shattered, rippling like a broken reflection. In its place was a memory, sharp and undeniable. She saw Mark standing in this very spot, his face etched with sorrow as he opened the journal. Words floated around him, fragments of thoughts and confessions. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I should have been there. I should have stopped it. Anna deserves better than this, better than me. The forest knows. It remembers. Maybe it can help me forget." The memory faded, leaving Anna breathless. Tears streamed down her face as she turned back to Samuel. He came here to try and let go, but instead the forest took him. Samuel placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll find him, Anna. Whatever's left of him, we'll find it." The forest stirred around them, its whispers growing louder. Anna clenched her fists, determination flaring within her. She would go as deep as it took, no matter what the forest demanded of her. Mark's truth was waiting, and she wouldn't leave without it. The forest's whispers rose to a crescendo as Anna and Samuel pressed onward, the air around them growing dense with an almost tangible weight. Shadows danced and swirled, creating shapes that flickered like memories trying to take form. Every step felt like a challenge, the ground beneath them shifting between solid earth and thick, unyielding mud. But Anna refused to stop. She was close, she could feel it. They emerged into a clearing unlike any they had seen before. The trees circled a small, tranquil glade, their gnarled branches reaching inward, as if to protect what lay within. In the center stood a simple cairn of stones, weathered and moss-covered, marked with an inscription that made Anna's heart clench. Mark Grayson, beloved husband, seeker of peace. It's not a mirage. Anna's legs gave way, and she fell to her knees. Tears blurred her vision as she traced the letters with trembling fingers. He's really gone, she whispered, the reality settling over her like a crushing weight. Samuel knelt beside her, his voice steady but heavy with sympathy. This place, it's where the forest holds its deepest memories. It's not just a grave, Anna. It's a part of him. The glade pulsed with an energy she couldn't explain. It was as though the forest itself was mourning, the air humming with echoes of Mark's voice, his laughter, his sorrow, and his final words. She closed her eyes, letting the whispers wash over her, piecing together the fragments of his story. Mark had come to the forest to find peace, to confront the guilt that had haunted him since Ethan's death. He had carried the weight of that moment for years, unable to forgive himself, even as he tried to build a life with Anna. The forest, with its strange and unrelenting memory, had drawn him in, offering both solace and punishment. He had left pieces of himself behind, his thoughts and regrets woven into the fabric of the woods. But there was more. As Anna stood and moved closer to the cairn, she noticed a small, weathered journal resting on the stones. She hesitated, then picked it up, the leather warm beneath her fingers. Opening it, she found Mark's final entries, his handwriting steady but pained. Anna, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I thought I could carry this alone, but the weight was too much. The forest, it's not just a place. It's alive, and it remembers everything. It's shown me Ethan, shown me the truth of what happened. I've finally forgiven myself, but I can't leave. The forest won't let me. Maybe it's where I belong now. Please know that I love you. I always have. The words blurred as tears streamed down her face. She clutched the journal to her chest, her grief mingling with profound sense of understanding. Mark had found the peace he had sought, even if it meant becoming part of the forest. Samuel stepped forward, his expression solemn. What will you do now? Anna looked around the glade, the whispers softening into a gentle hum. She thought of the letters, the memories, the fragments of Mark that lingered in this place. I'll honor him, she said, and I'll make sure others know the truth. About him, about this forest, about everything. Together, they built the cairn higher, adding stones as a testament to Mark's journey and his final resting place. As they worked, the forest seemed to shift, the oppressive weight lifting slightly, as if it, too, had found some measure of peace. When they finally left the glade, Anna felt a strange sense of calm. The forest no longer felt hostile or overwhelming. It was still alive, still watching, but now it felt like an ally rather than an adversary. The letters and journal in her bag would serve as her guide to share Mark's story, to ensure his memory lived on. As they emerged from the woods and back into the soft light of the town, Anna paused and looked back. The forest loomed, vast and mysterious, but she no longer feared it. Mark's echoes would always be there, a part of the place that had both taken and redeemed him. And in her heart, she knew she'd never truly be alone again. Thank you for diving into our incredible stories. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures.